So this is basically what the output image looks like, okay? This is one that I have actually created on my own using the algorithm that I'm about to walk through, or algorithms rather, that I'm about to walk through. But I just kind of wanted to give you an idea on what we're going for. You can basically see that I have my top artists here, and then I have their corresponding most played songs, and then I take the top artists that I have, grab an image, and then print it in this square here. So ultimately, I'm going to go ahead and remove this just because it's going to be confusing since this is like the total output. And basically what we just have is this file here, which is bg.png. And I basically use Photoshop to cover up the text with purple and then get rid of the band, basically just making a, I think it's 540 by 540 pixel image here. There is some transparency on VS Code right now, so it kind of looks like you can see this Apex Legends symbol in the background. I'm going to go ahead and remove that just so it's not confusing. Okay, now there is no more transparency. So you can see that we have this nice image that we can basically try and print our text onto, right? So where are we getting this text? That kind of leads us to Google Takeout. And I've saved a couple of images on what Takeout looks like just because I've already gone through this process. But if you go to takeout.google.com and you make sure that you're logged into the right account, you can basically export a copy of content in your Google account. So what I did is I just hit deselect all and got rid of everything, and I scrolled all the way down to the bottom, and then I hit YouTube and YouTube Music, right? And again, I've already done this, but this is the only thing that you need in order to make all of this work. And you'll end up getting a zip file that contains a JSON file. And that JSON file contains all of the info that we're actually looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste over a little sample of what that looks like. I've actually already done this, like I said, so I'm going to close this tab. And I'm going to take a look at what our sample JSON looks like. So you can basically view this in either Notepad++, or you can open up VS Code. In my case, I'll just open up VS Code because it's pretty easy. But I have a couple Polyphia songs here, and I also have one Polyphia music video. So Playing God and Ego Death are the two songs, and then I've also watched the Playing God video. So since all of this data, and again, this is just a sample of my larger JSON that I exported, but basically, you can imagine that if this is like 100,000 lines or something like that from an entire year, which includes both your YouTube and your YouTube music history, then it would be kind of difficult to parse this hand by hand, which again is kind of what we're trying to avoid, right? So you have this differentiator, and that is the header. For YouTube music stuff, says YouTube music, and for YouTube it's just YouTube, right? So we can basically write a parser based on that alone. But what I'm going to do instead is copy over my takeout file, which again is like closer to 100,000 lines than it is to 34, but I just kind of wanted to show you what this sample looks like. So you can see here I've created this takeout directory, and then I've just put my notasui.json file in there. So what I'd like to do is basically create our very first kind of parser logic. And I guess the first thing that we do before that is to create a new Python file, pywrapped.py. And that will exist in our directory here. And of course, nothing is in it. So I'm kind of cheating because again, I've already done this, and import statements are really not that interesting. So I'm just going to paste in my import statements, and I'm going to talk about why I'm importing the things that I am. So as you can see, this is kind of a hefty block of imports here. So I've increased the font size a little bit just so you can see this a bit better. But what happens when I run this? Absolutely nothing, because there's no logic in here at all. Remember that the first thing that we're going to do is just take a look at the sample JSON file, and the way to do that, of course, is to do something like this. Try file path equals sys.argv1. So that's our sys import, as you see, and then we're going to accept and then I'm going to print basically the usage, right? So there is a proper way that I want to basically run this command, and that is basically pywrap.py, take out yourname.json, whatever the file is. And then if you do that wrong, I'm just going to quit, right? So Python 3, pywrapped.py with nothing in it. Of course, I have my settings that I have not created yet. So I need to create my settings file, touch settings.py. And in my settings.py, I'm going to go ahead and start with this. I need to refresh here. I'm going to create basically a list, and that is going to be called filtered artists. And the reason I'm doing that is because when I was looking at the JSON file that I have in my takeout, right, notasui.json, I noticed that there's stuff like original, soundtrack, and other stuff. You could also imagine a case where you listen to an artist with a name that you don't necessarily want to be on an image that you share. For example, if you listen to basically any death metal band from the early 2000s, you might not want that displayed. So anyway, this is where you can add death metal band here if you don't want that in your output image. But yeah, I will leave that up to you to filter out any artists that you don't want. So within pywrapped.py, we can go ahead and try and run that again. And so now we get that usage error. Basically, what we're doing here is we're getting the index of 1 of my system arguments. And if I don't have, this is basically what that is, right? And if this is not present here, then this is index 0, right? So basically we get an index out of range error if I try to hit index 1 and there is no index 1. Now if I rerun this and I actually do my takeout.yourname or takeout.yourname.json, and the reason that nothing happens is because I'm not actually using file path. If I tried to do anything with file path, so let's go ahead and use file path, right? I'm going to put a comment here that just says parse history and keep track of plays per artist. And that's just going to be with open file path as YT history, YouTube history, JSON hist equals JSON.load YouTube history, right? So now we're basically trying to, and this is why I imported JSON right here. What we're going to try and do is just load this as a JSON blob, right? So then we can basically use use that huge amount of data as if it were a dictionary in Python, which is going to be very helpful here very shortly. But if I run this, I will get an error because yourname.json doesn't actually exist. Remember, it is called notasui.json. Pretty sure I could just add this to my try block at the very beginning. So we'll make sure that that is indented properly. This, of course, is not quite true here because I'm not doing anything yet. So just say load Google takeout file as JSON. Cool, so we can try this now. And so the accept block does hit because that file doesn't exist. Now if I do an actual notasui.json, okay, nothing bad happens, which is great. So back in my settings.py file, we're going to do a couple things. We need another import, and that is the pillow library in Python, which allows us to load images. And what I'm going to do is from PIL import image and image font. And you can probably see where I'm going with this, but I'm going to go ahead and open up our, well, I'm going to load our fonts first of all. So try WR font, and that is just image font dot true type, and font here, right? I don't actually have a font for that. But then I'm going to have a WR font bold equals image font dot true type, and then font 2. So we need to find some fonts. We'll do that in a moment. We also need the font size at the end, so I'm going to do just based on some trial and error earlier. 46 and then 54 seem to be right. So you can see the arguments for image font.truetype are basically the font directory / file path, and then the actual size. So we will basically define which fonts we're going to use here in a moment, but we're going to put an accept block, and then we're going to basically tell the user, hey, you need to have the right fonts in the font directory, otherwise it just quits, right? So we're going to put this down at the bottom, filtered artists, and then I'm going to have bg image, and I'm going to have that basically as the variable bg image.open, and then image bg.png, which is this right here. So when settings gets loaded, it's going to basically execute everything that's here, right? And thus we will have the bg image file open to us when we run pyrap.py, because we do a from settings import star right here. Additionally, we need a few variables. I would like to keep track of the width and height of this image, which I know is, it's like 1500 by 1620 or something like that, but it makes more sense to get that dynamically. So I'm going to have width equal to list bg.size, and then of course the 0 index is the x value, which is width, and then height is list bg.size, and then the y value is index 1, right? Because bg.size is just going to return a tuple, two values, an x and a y. So this is how I'm getting those two variables. And then my print coords, basically the first place that we print anything, which is going to be the column for our top artists. So literally the string top artists is going to be the first thing that we print. That is going to be, and we'll go back to the image, right? But that's going to be like right around here. So this image is actually, it's like a flipped 1080p image. So it should be 1920 pixels tall, right? So if I took 1920 divided by 2, I would get 960. So ideally, I want to start printing right around 960, maybe a little bit, maybe give it a little spacing, right? So probably like at 1000 or something like that. And I could just do a print im width, im height. And now run this. Of course, I don't have any fonts yet, so that's going to cause an issue. So what I did was just look for Spotify circular font. And I basically went, I don't even remember. I think it was here maybe. And I downloaded it. So it gives you a bunch of different styles of this, and I don't know if this site is legit or not. So if you download the font from this site, please do so at your own risk. However, I ended up with a few different files. And again, if we go back to this here, I can basically define them as font1, and then that's just going to be font slash circular standard book.otf, and font 2 is circular standard medium.otf. So I have placed them in the font directory here, and we can go ahead and run that again. Okay, so we actually get 1080 by 1920, which basically gives us some information about this image. It gives us some hints on kind of where in the image we should be printing our text. And the first thing that we're going to print is basically going to be at print coords, right? So we need to go ahead and set our print coords. So print coords equals, and I'm going to start that with an x value of 100. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my variable im height, and I'm going to divide that by 2. So that's going to basically be 1920 divided by 2. And I'm going to add an offset of about 120 pixels. So I believe that should basically be like right around here, if I were to guess. And then we can go ahead and start. That's basically what we're going to be using for the place that we put that top artist's string. So there's one other thing that we need here, and that is going to be our artist image coords, and that's just going to be 270, 270. And the way that I figure that out is because I look at this, and this right here is a square, knowing that we have a, basically this is 1080, right? So 1080 divided by 4 is 270. Let's double check that. 1080 divided by 4 is 270. So that means when I get to this first bit, then I should be at the point, so this is 0, 0, right? So I go in this direction 270 pixels, and then I go to the right 270 pixels. That gives me this point right here, which means the starting point for where I print my artist image should be at 270, 270. And at this point, I believe we are all done with the settings, and we no longer need to revisit it unless we need to add artists to the filtered artist, or if we want to change the font. Okay, so we're going to basically create a new section here, and it's going to have, I think, 3 or 4 different functions in it. The first one is actually the most important function in the entire project, and that is actually parsing and making sense of the JSON file. So I'm going to create that and give it a comment of function to keep track of plays per song. And what I can do at this point is basically declare that function as parse songs. And as an input, we're going to take the path to loaded JSON, right? Which is basically just this JSON history, since this is where it gets loaded. And what we're going to do here is we're going to look at, first of all, we're going to create an output dictionary, since that's what we're going to return. And keep in mind, you know, these wrapped images have your top 5 artists. So basically that's what we're caring about. We're going to find the most played artist from our takeout file, and then we're going to basically take the top 5 of those, right, and we're going to output that as this output dictionary. So the way that I'm going to actually get that data is to iterate through the loaded JSON. So for item in path to loaded JSON, if the item header, and recall that in sample.json, this header is going to be YouTube music, right? So if the item header is equal to YouTube music, then we're going to go ahead and get the metadata for that, right? So if we go back to sample.json, there's a couple bits of information that we care about, right? And it's in the subtitles area, which is basically the band. So if we want to get the artist's name, we basically have to go to subtitles and then the name here, right? Another point that I wanted to make is that this URL applies to the artist's YouTube music page, right? Whereas this channel refers to the YouTube like video channel for Polyphia. So we're gonna basically take a look at this later, and I possibly could do that right now in the same function, but ultimately I did not do that in my design. So what we really care about is the subtitles name, right? Because that gives us Polyphia topic. We're gonna get rid of this topic thing. I don't know why that's in every single artist name. But in any case, we care about this, and then we also care about the title, right, which is the song. So there's a couple things going on here. The first thing that I want to do is I want to get the metadata. So metadata equals item subtitles, right? And then metadata equals metadata index 0, because again, we only really care about that Polyphia name, right? Which again is in the key name. So artist equals metadata name. And then finally, we're going to get rid of that topic portion. So artist equals artist.split. And then we're going to split on topic. And we want to take everything before the topic piece right here, right? So that would be index 0, which is just going to be Polyphia in the case of the sample JSON. And then we also need the song name, which is going to be song name equals item. And then we're going to do this whole title thing again, right? Title. And so that will then be, we basically need to get rid of this watched piece, right? Where do we find that? Watched Ego Death featuring Steve I. Again, this is not a video. It's YouTube music. I don't know why it says watch. It's just a YouTube music thing for whatever reason. But yeah, so we're going to go ahead and get rid of the watched prefix. And we can do that, of course, by doing a dot split on the watched string, watched space rather, and then we're going to go to index 1 because we care about everything after watched space. So then what we're going to do is if artist, not in filtered artists, and artist is in outdict, right? And that's this dictionary here. What we're going to do at this point, this is a potential issue, right? Because if you listen to the same song a bazillion times or something like that, or just a ton of songs from the same artist, this list could get gigantic. It might actually make sense to use a different data structure than a list, but in my case it was fine. But yeah, just wanted to make a note of that. What we're going to do is out dictionary artist dot append, and then we're going to take the string song name. So basically, we're just going to add that to a list that already exists. However, in the case that artist is not in the dictionary, that means the list does not exist. So we have to have an elif artist, not in filtered artists, and artist, not in outdict. Then we basically need to create a key for the artist and assign the value to a list, and the first value or only element of that list will be song name. Okay. And then we can just return the out dictionary. So this should be relatively short. There should be 2 entries. Well, there will be one key, which is Polyphia, and then a list of Playing God and Ego Death if this works correctly. However, we're not actually printing it. So I need to go ahead and most listened to equals parse songs JSON hist, right? So that actually takes the this right here, and then it passes it into parse songs, the function, right? And then we can go ahead and print most listened to, and that should give us the data we're looking for. So I actually added an is here, and I don't need an is. And I will go ahead and run that on my sample JSON. So here we go. We have the key Polyphia, and then we have the value, the 2 songs that I've listened to by Polyphia. And it does not have that Playing God YouTube video because we do not match on the header YouTube. We only match on the header YouTube music. So at this point, I think we can go ahead and run this on the larger takeout JSON file. So here's an example of me running that on the larger JSON file. And of course, you can see the multiple different songs that we don't see in sample because I am including the entirety of notasweet.json in our logic, right? So Polyphia is a single artist. It only exists once because there is only one key for Polyphia. However, I've listened to Playing God, Ego Death, Chimera, Chimera again, Genesis, Ego Death, again, Bloodbath, Chimera again, right? And that basically gives us an idea on what we're going to do to determine which song I listen to most by Polyphia, right? Now, of course, that is to assume that Polyphia is in my top listened to. What happens if I have another artist that ends up having a list that's larger than this? And that means that I listen to them more than Polyphia, right? And that is the case in my JSON file. So we need some logic to go ahead and work through that scenario. So I'm going to get rid of this print statement right here. And I'm going to replace it with top 5. And what I'm going to do is list most listened to dot keys. You'll probably be thinking to yourself, okay, well that just includes the dictionary that we got as an output here, right? Which again, this has not weeded out the other 99% of the artists, right? Because we only want top 5. So really what I need to do is I need to pass this output into another function. And that is going to just be called top 5 for lack of any creativity. So that means we need to create a top 5 function. And I'm going to keep this alphabetical order, so I'm going to do it after the parse songs function, and I will do that so right here. So get top 5 artists and add to top 5 list. And so I'll do a def top 5 and most listened to dictionary. And basically, I'll create a new dictionary very similar to this right here, but I'm going to call that top 5 dictionary. And basically, here's the fun part, right? We're going to actually iterate through that dictionary, and then we're going to iterate through a sorted version of the dictionary, rather. And it's going to be sorted based on the length of the list that we saw above when we were looking at the Polyphia songs that I've listened to. So the syntax for this can be a little bit ugly, but it basically looks like for k, v, and sorted most listened to dict.items. And if you want to see something really cool, I actually have OpenAI open up, right? And what I can do is write a function to sort through a dictionary based on the length of the value list. And this is basically what I did to come up with this, right? Now, it returned a bit too much. Basically, what I was looking for was this sorted items key lambda XXO, which is pretty cool. But yeah, so if you haven't used OpenAI, that was just a tangent there. But by and large, I'm doing something very similar, which is for K, V, and sorted, most listened to dictionary. And then, of course, our key is going to be a lambda. And I'm going to use the variable x so I don't feel completely replaced by AI just yet. But of course, what we're going to do is have that be the length of the list, which is at position x1, or index x1 rather. So yeah. Then I'm going to go ahead and reverse it because I want the ones with the most hits first. So reverse equals true. And then I only actually care about the first 5, right? So once I've reversed it and I've got the highest song count list first, followed by second highest, third highest, blah, 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 I want to stop at index 5, or right just before index 5, right? Which of course would be the 6th artist, because I don't care. I only care about the top 5. So yeah. We're going to go ahead and have that be the criteria for this loop. I will go ahead and get the current artist. So cur artist will be equal to our key. And then again, we need to get rid of that topic. So key split on the, let's see, what did I use? Yeah, dash topic, space, dash space topic, and then the 0 index. And then what I would like to do is basically just add top 5 dictionary, and then I need a key for that current artist, cur artist. We want to count all of the items in the list, and then we want to take a set of that list, and then we basically want to get the maximum, right? So we can basically do a max set list of our list, which is V, right? I don't know that I need to declare this as a list, but I did it anyway. And then we want our key to be our list.count. So key equals v.count, which again is the value in our dictionary. So what I can then do is just return the top 5 dictionary. And with any luck, we can just print that. And so we get my top 5 artists, which is pretty cool. So yeah, Bill Murray, the Midnight No Pressure Belmont movements. If you've heard of them, we'd probably be friends. And if not, that is cool too. But we also need their top songs because we're not only printing a column of top artists, we are printing a column of top songs. And the way that I'm going to do that is top songs equals list. And I'm actually going to just use the values, which is most listened to dot values. And I should be able to just print that right after. So print top songs. And so we get level 99 Roid Mage, River of Darkness, Lock It Up, Bowser's Castle, and Full Circle. One thing you might notice here is not all of them are single quotes. We actually have one that's double quotes, and this did cause an issue when I was developing this in the beginning. But the reason that it exists is because there is an apostrophe between Bowser and the S, right? So Bowser's Castle, which is why it has these double quotes so that it wouldn't accidentally mess up because of the single quotes. Anyway, just something that I thought I would point out. I think it would possibly do that as well if there's like a forward slash or a backslash or a special character in the name of the song. So good to keep that in mind. So at this point, we basically have everything that we need to draw on the image, right? Again, we only care about the top 5 artists and the top 5 songs corresponding to those artists. We have the 2 lists that we care about, top 5 and top songs. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new section, and that is going to be called Draw Top Artists Column. And we can basically say the draw text is equal to image draw.draw BG, and this goes back to our imports. One of the things from Pillow that we imported was image draw. And so that allows us to actually write text on top of an image that we load as a parameter, which is BG. And again, we load that in settings.py. So what I would like to do now is basically say where we're going to draw this image. So in order to figure out where I draw the text that occurs after the top artists column header, which is just top artists, I need to know how large the text is going to be. So this is kind of a ridiculous line here, and I'm just going to copy and paste it in, but we'll talk about it. So I'm going to have a variable, and it's going to be equal to an x and a y value. And the x value is going to be the x value of the getSize function, which we used previously, but it's going to be on the string top artists. So what this is doing is it's basically saying, okay, what font do I have and what am I printing? And then what is the size of that? And then what is the x coordinate or 0 index, right? And that is going to be our x value. And then, of course, the 1 index is going to be our y value. And that gives us an idea on where we need to print the following line of text, which we can basically feed into our draw function. And we will do that here in a second. So then I'm going to do a draw text.text. And we're going to use our print coords, which we basically defined in settings.py, right? Print coords, and then the string that we're going to print, of course, being top artists, and the font that we want is WR font, I believe is what we loaded it as. And then our fill is going to be that bright yellow color that is present in all of the Spotify wrapped images. And the RGB for that is 238, 248, 87. At least that is what I found it to be. So at that point, I think we can go ahead and just save this image because I just want to see where that text ends up. And what I would like to do is save that in my image directory at the very end of everything. And I'm just going to put output dev, and we'll talk about what this is doing. Actually, I'm going to comment this out for now because this is ultimately the way that I'm going to output our images, but I'm going to get rid of the f string. Actually, I think I can just leave it. Output dev.png. So with any luck, I can run this. And I should see a new image in here, output dev.png. And so we see the top artists did, in fact, print where we expected it to, and it looks pretty good. So what we're going to go ahead and do at this point is start printing our top 5 artists. So the reason that we got this artist call coords thing is because we're going to update our print coords, which is going to be, actually I'm going to have a comment here, update print coords to account for size of top artists text block, right? And so that's just going to be print coords equals print coords index 0, which is the x value, and then print coords y value plus we need the, I think it's just the artist coords y value, which is artist coords index of 1, and then we're going to add a little padding there, which is just 40. So then we have basically where we want to start printing our artists, and so I can put, basically reference this new function that we are going to create called draw column. And the input for that, or the parameters for that, are going to be print coords and then my top 5 list, right? So we don't actually have a function called draw column just yet. So if I run this, everything is going to break. So yeah, let's go ahead and create that. And we're going to do it again in alphabetical order. So that will be above my parse songs function. And I'll go ahead and add a comment function to draw a column top artists, top songs. So this can actually be used for both. When I originally did the development on this a few days ago, I had them in separate functions and it was super ugly, but I realized, hey, I could probably just, cut down on the number of lines of code if I did them in the same function. So that is what I'm doing here. So def draw column, and again, we're taking in the print coords and then the call to draw. And we're going to have a for idx val in enumerate, and then we're going to enumerate through the call to draw. And of course, that gives me basically 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the value, which again is like Bill Murray movements, yada yada, the midnight, blah blah blah. And so that is the actual value, the string name of the band, right? Which is what we're going to be printing. So for idx val and enumerate, that's basically what enumerate gives us, is the ability to get the index and also the value at the same time, which is very useful. We're going to get toPrint, which is just going to be the string, and again, that is currently equal to val, or rather val is currently equal to that. Then I'm going to say if the length of that string, toPrint, is greater than 15, we basically need to truncate that because it's going to just print, if we have a band that has like 50 characters or something like that, it's just going to print it forever and it's going to ruin our spacing and it's going to look terrible. So I need to truncate that by doing toPrint equals an f string of toPrint up until index 12. And then I'm going to put ... which is exactly what Spotify does. I don't know if they use 12 characters or if they have something that's slightly more complex, but by and large, this seems to do something very similar to what they do. Then I can have draw text.text, and again, my input for that is print coords. And then I'm going to print in this f string because it's a bit hefty, but we'll talk about it. So we're going to take the index, which for the first band is going to be 0, right? So we need to add 1 to that. And then toPrint is just the artist name at this point. And then we're going to have the bold font, and then the fill is going to be that super electric yellow font as well, and these are the RGB values there. So once we draw the artist at index 0, we need to update our print coords so that the next artist is then printed lower. It's going to be the same X value, but it's going to be a different Y value. And the way that we can do that is to reference the old X value and update the Y value. So print coords is just going to be equal to the old X value and then the old Y value plus 80. And we can go ahead and save that, and that should work for both the top artists and the top songs. Now the issue, of course, is we have not printed the column for top songs just yet, and so I'm only going to add our artists. And basically I can do that by calling the draw column function, which I'm already doing here, and then saving that to the output dev file. So I have a typo. I forgot to capitalize the C at line 61. Okay, try that again. And that's because it's artist call chords. Okay, let's see if that worked. Awesome. So we have the bold version of the font. We have some nice spacing. This seems to look pretty nice, and overall I am happy with it. So it is time to move on to the next column, which again is not top artists, but their corresponding top songs. After draw column, I'm going to go ahead and create a new comment here. It's going to be update print chords to account for top songs starting position. And basically, to avoid typing in another one of these ugly kind of lines here, I'm just going to paste that in. But basically, yeah, you can see that I'm taking the image width and I'm dividing by 2, which will kind of give me that middle point, right, around here. And then I'm adding a bit of spacing to that, which I think was 32 or something. And then I'm adding 120, which you should notice is the same Y value for top artists. And this was taken from the initial value of print chords, which is stored in settings.py. So in any case, what I can go ahead and do now is I can just take a very similar line right here, and instead of artist call chords, I'm going to call it song call chords, and I'm going to paste that in because it's very difficult to type. And then what we can do is the very similar, again, the logic like on these two lines is identical, right? So we're just going to draw the text, draw text, text, and that is just going to be print chords, top songs. And we should be able to, at this point, just call the draw columns. Actually, no, we need to update print chords similar to what I did here. So I will then do another comment, update print chords to account for size of top songs text block, right? And that will be another just quick copy and paste to avoid any errors. And so now I can just call that draw column function again with print chords since it's been updated. But instead of top 5, I'm going to use top songs. And of course, I should get the expected output of the additional column with the songs. And we can check output dev, and of course we do see top artists and their corresponding top songs, and yes, these do line up. So I'm pretty happy with this. There is one thing that's missing, and it's painfully obvious that it's missing, and that's the image of the artist. In this case, it would be the artist Bill Murray. And there's also, on the Spotify ones, there's also like this total minutes listened to and favorite genre. I probably could get that data, but it would be very difficult to the point that I kind of just decided against it. This to me looks just fine, and unless someone was being especially nitpicky, once we get this image in here, I think it would look basically the way that I want it to look, right? And I'm completely okay with it. So now we need to talk about how we're actually going to get the artist image, because this is a little bit tricky. So right here is a Python project that I basically have put in my requirements.txt, and that is YT Music API. And it is by Sigma67, so thank you Sigma67 for continually working on this. It is actually very helpful, and because of it, I have been able to actually leverage the YouTube Music API to get an image of the band I'm looking for. And so really what you need to do if you are interested in getting this configured, which is basically required, right, is to see the documentation for detailed instructions. And what I'm doing is basically an authenticated request to my instance of, or rather my user login of YouTube Music to do queries on a specific artist, right? So basically what I have done is I have gone through the instructions to set up my authentication, and you will find all of that here, right? You basically need your headers auth.json, which follow this guideline. I did not at first, and I had some issues with it, but then I basically went through these Firefox steps. I logged into my account. I then looked at developer tools, and then I clicked on my library a couple times until I saw a post request with a status of 200. And then I basically right-clicked and copied on my request headers. I saved them to a file, and then I basically ran this on that file. And once I got my resulting JSON string, I basically saved that to my headers file, right? So please, if you have any issues, this is the page that you want. It will guide you through everything, and I would recommend using Firefox because it was easiest for me. But yeah, so what I have done is copied my headers.json file into my directory. I have also copied another file called testheaders.py, and I'm actually going to include this in the GitHub repo as well, so you can make sure that you're actually logged in, right? So basically what this is just following the documentation. It's logging in using my headers.json file, and then it's searching for the Midnight Nocturnal. If you see anything other than this or something very similar to this, then you have not exported your headers correctly. But basically, I'm just going to run testheaders.py, and you see this JSON blob as output, and this has basically what I'm looking for, and that is a thumbnail of the band, right? So I'm going to use slightly different logic when I am grabbing the thumbnail, and I'm also going to be storing this in memory because I don't want to save this, right? I just literally want to write it onto that BG image. So we're going to go ahead and create a new function, and that is going to be located in pywrapped.py. And of course, using the alphabetical order that I've been using, that will be right above parse songs. And so I'm going to make a comment that basically says function to probably, maybe, download an artist thumbnail using YT Music API. So, you know, there's a lot of room for errors here, unfortunately. In my limited testing of 5 artists, it worked just fine, but I can imagine that it does not work just fine all the time. So, you know, if you want to do this manually, I could totally see why. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and try and automate it as best as possible. And that's just going to be a function called get thumbnail. So we're going to need an artist channel string, which we unfortunately do not have just yet, but we're going to walk through that in a moment as well. And so basically what I'm going to do is just create that instance of YouTube Music headers.json is my authentication, and then I'm going to do artist results equals yt.getArtist artist channel string, and then I'm going to do thumbs equals artist results thumbnails, because that's basically the key in the JSON that I'm looking for. And then my response is going to be requests.get thumbs index 0, because the first one always seems to be the right size for whatever reason. Thank you, Google/YouTube. But yeah, the URL for that, I'm going to perform a get request on, which goes back up to our imports, and you see that I have requests here. This is why. Then I'm going to return the bytes IO of the response.content, which is basically just the literal bytes, which I can then use with the pillow library, and I should be able to just paste that directly onto BG, the image. So return bytes IO response.content. Cool. So we still need that artist channel string, and I do not have anything set up for that just yet. I basically need to come up with a top channel ID, right? And this is going to be the channel ID for the band Bill Murray, because that is my most listened to in my Google Takeout not a sweet.json file. So underneath where we got our top songs, I'm going to go ahead and get the YouTube channel ID of top artist. And really this should be YouTube music channel ID to avoid any confusion. So we're going to start out with a top channel ID of none. And what I'm going to do is for item in JSON history, if item header is YouTube music, of course, I'm going to get the same metadata. And again, you know, I mentioned that I could probably do this up in the beginning, but anyway, I didn't. Subtitles metadata equals metadata 0. Artist equals metadata name. Artist equals artist dot split on the space dash space topic, and then grab index 0. If artist equals top 5 0, which is just Bill Murray in my case, top channel ID equals metadata URL dot split, and so we're going to get the value at the end of the slash. So in order to do that, and this needs to be close bracket, we need a dot split on the / character and then the last index. And then we'll go ahead, once we find that, we'll just quit, right? So basically what we're doing is we're looking through our JSON history. We're then comparing the artist to our top 5 index of 0, which is just Bill Murray in my case. And then we're going to get the top channel ID, or we're going to set the top channel ID to metadata URL split. So in the sample.json, we're basically looking for this URL and then the channel. And this is the string that corresponds to Polyphia. And of course, every artist has a similar unique string here, right? So when we have that, then we can basically go back to the get thumbnail function and feed that artist channel string, right? And then this YouTube Music API will basically handle the rest for us and return the bytes IO content of that image. So that brings us to our last bit of code, and we're going to try to get and draw thumbnail in blank 540 by 540 box. And again, that is the box in the middle here. What we're going to do is if top channel ID, and the reason I'm doing this check is I want to make sure that I actually was able to get a top channel ID, right? And if this didn't work, then top channel ID is just going to be equal to none. And in that case, I'm not even going to try to do this. So that will probably save a lot of headache down the line. So I'm going to do if top channel ID try artist photo equals get thumbnail. So I'm going to call that get thumbnail function we just created. Top channel ID is my parameter. And then I'm going to load that. So loaded photo equals image.open artist photo. And then I'm going to do artist image coords. And I'm just going to paste this in, but I'm basically coming up with where I'm going to print that image. And so that's going to be at the original artist coords X value And then I'm going to take 540, because again, this image is 540 by 540. And then I'm going to subtract half of the value of the loaded photo, right? So that's going to basically center it on the y-axis of that blank 540 by 540 square. And I'm just going to do a bg.paste loaded photo at the location of artist image coordinates, and I'm going to put the accept pass. All right, so I'm just not going to do that. If anything goes wrong, just don't do anything. I'm pretty sure that would be the case here. And yeah, with a little bit of luck, this will probably maybe work. So we can go back over to output dev. And for whatever reason, we do not see the image in the middle. So let's go ahead and troubleshoot. I guess the first thing I want to know is if I got a top channel ID. So print top channel ID. Okay, so I did get that. So if top channel ID, try to get the artist's photo, get thumbnail top channel ID, loaded photo. Is that the problem? Let's go ahead and try it again. I'll remove this print statement. Okay, output dev. Still didn't work. This is my favorite debug log. Okay. So in theory, the get thumbnail function does get called with our top channel ID. Let's go back up to get thumbnail. Artist channel string, YT equals YT music headers.json. This is correct. Get artist channel string. Thumbs equals artist underscore results thumbnails. Response equals requests dot get thumbs index 0 URL, and then we just return the bytes.io response content. So that's why it's always important to double check your settings, because I actually had a typo. It should be artist image coords. So let's see if that works. It does. So as you can see, we have the top artists column as well as my top 5 artists for the year. We then have the top songs column with the corresponding top songs. And then finally, we have the image of the top artist. So the very last thing I wanted to touch on is this other app called instafest.app, and as you can guess, it does not support YouTube Music, and this is pretty sad because I really think the output of this instafest app, basically a 3-day app, was really cool. So I went ahead and basically used the same data, or rather the same functions, to create something similar to this. So if you got this far in the tutorial and you wanted a challenge, you totally have the ability to do something very similar to this, and I would definitely recommend giving it a try if you want to work on your Python/software engineering skills. Otherwise, if you just want the spoilers and want to actually be able to create something like this with your own Google Takeout results, you can find this at my PyInstaFest repo right here. So I've uploaded all of the code and the boilerplate background image and not my takeout file, but basically just the directory structure that you need to make this work. Couple caveats: you do need to download and add your own fonts to the font directory. I cannot distribute the circular font. I'm not trying to get sued by Spotify. And you also need to do the takeout process and the headers process as well if you want to make this work the way that I displayed just a moment ago. But If there are any issues, feel free to leave an issue on GitHub, or you can leave a comment on YouTube or whatever. I'm hoping that you're able to get this working should you want to. I know that there aren't a ton of YouTube music users out there, but I figure if there are people working on projects to make it a better experience, then that is a great thing. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.